Good evening, community. Welcome to a new session of those horror stories that we know you like so much. Don't forget to subscribe, give us your valuable like, and activate the campaign. The sound of nothingness. I have always been a lover of solitude. My small apartment, located on the top floor of an old building, was my refuge. The walls, stained by the passage of time, held secrets that only I seemed capable of perceiving. My nights passed in almost absolute quiet. The only sound that broke the silence was the ticking of the wall clock. But one night, that silence became unsettling. A subtle buzzing, like that of an insect trapped in a jar, began to resonate in my ears. At first, I attributed it to my imagination, to the fatigue of a long day. However, the buzzing persisted, becoming more intense each time. I tried covering my ears, but it was useless. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if it were inside my own head. I began to feel an unbearable pressure in my ears, as if someone were whispering secrets directly into my brain. The following days were torn. The buzzing did not cease for a moment. I became irritable, sleepless, and started having auditory hallucinations. I heard voices calling my name, whispers promising unimaginable secrets. I decided to consult a doctor, but the tests revealed nothing abnormal. They prescribed me anxiety medication, but it had no effect. Desperate, I turned to an acupuncturist who told me that the sound I was hearing was the result of an energetic imbalance. During the acupuncture sessions, I began to have strange visions. I saw flickering lights, shadows moving in the corners of the room, and always the buzzing, ever stronger. One night, while lying in bed, trying to sleep, the buzzing suddenly stopped. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. However, instead of feeling relief, I was overwhelmed by a sense of emptiness, as if a part of me had disappeared. The next day, I woke up with a sense of mental clarity that I hadn't experienced in weeks. The buzzing had completely vanished, but something had changed in me. I felt more connected to the world, more aware of the energy around us. I began to research auditory phenomena and discovered that many people had experienced similar sensations. Some attributed it to near-death experiences, others to paranormal phenomena. I didn't know what to believe. The only thing I know is that the sound of silence became the most terrifying sound I have ever heard. And although the buzzing has disappeared, the experience marked me forever. Do you think the sound I heard had a physical or spiritual origin? Or perhaps it was simply the result of my disturbed mind? Have you had a similar experience? Share your story in the comments. The portrait. I have always been an art enthusiast. My apartment is a small personal gallery with paintings of various styles and eras. One of them, an oil portrait I inherited from my great-grandmother, has always fascinated me. It depicts a young woman with an intense gaze and a black dress that seems to absorb light. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. It was simply part of the decoration. But over time, I began to notice something strange. The woman in the portrait seemed to be staring at me, no matter from what angle I looked at her. Her eyes, dark and deep, seemed to penetrate my soul. Initially, I attributed it to my imagination. But things got strange when I started having recurring dreams. In them, the woman in the portrait would step out of the frame and chase me through dark, labyrinthine hallways. I would wake up startled, cold sweat dripping, with the feeling that something was watching me. Intrigued, I decided to investigate the origin of the painting. I visited an expert in ancient art, who confirmed that the portrait was a unique and valuable piece. However, he couldn't provide any information about the woman depicted. One night, while working in my study, I heard a strange noise coming from the room where the painting hung. I got up and headed there, my heart pounding. Upon entering, I saw that the painting had changed. The woman's eyes were now a deep red, and her smile was sinister and mocking. Terrified, I tried to remove the painting from the wall, but it was as if it were glued. The more I pulled, the more it clung to the wall. Suddenly, I felt a cold presence behind me. I turned, but there was no one. Since then, things have worsened. Objects moved on their own. Lights flickered for no reason, and I heard whispers at night. The figure of the woman in the portrait started appearing in the most unexpected places, always staring at me with those piercing red eyes. One day, I decided to consult a medium. She told me that the woman in the portrait was trapped in the painting and was looking for a way to be released. She explained that the painting was a kind of portal between our world and hers, and I had opened that door by taking an interest in her. The medium warned me that if I wanted to end the apparitions, I had to destroy the painting. But I couldn't do it. I felt a strange connection to that woman, despite the terror she instilled in me. I decided to lock the painting in a safe and keep it in a secure place. But for how long could I keep her locked up? And what would happen if I ever decided to set her free? What do you think I should do? Should I destroy the painting and end my suffering? Or should I try to find a way to communicate with the woman in the portrait and help her find peace? The ghost town, in the depths of the forests of the Appalachian Mountains, lies an abandoned town called Blackwood. It was once a prosperous place, full of life and joy. But now, only ruins and silence remain. The inhabitants of Blackwood disappeared without a trace. There are no signs of violence or struggle. One day, everyone simply left, leaving behind their homes, their belongings, and their lives. Since then, Blackwood has become a place of mystery and terror. Locals avoid the place, fearful of what might lurk in its shadows. The few who venture there disappear without a trace. One night, a group of young people decided to explore Blackwood. They carried flashlights and cameras, eager to capture images of this abandoned place. But as they ventured into the forest, the fog began to thicken, obscuring the path. The young people separated, trying to find their way back. But one by one, they disappeared into the fog. Only one of them managed to escape the forest, terrified, and with the feeling that something had been following them. Since then, Blackwood has been a forbidden place. No one dares to enter its bounds, fearing to share the same fate as the missing young people. And the fog, which envelops the town in a shroud of mystery, continues to hide Blackwood's secrets, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. The man behind the door. I always thought I knew fear. I had spent entire nights watching horror movies, listening to friends' stories, reading chilling tales. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that night. It was an ordinary night, one of those where the city's silence feels heavier than usual. I lived alone in a small apartment on the 5th floor of an old building. The walls were thin, and I could often hear my neighbors' arguments or the TV on in the next unit. But that night, everything was calm, a silence that felt deafening. I had had a long day and just wanted to rest. I made myself some tea, put on my pajamas, and went to bed early. I turned off the lights and let the darkness envelop me. Everything was fine until, at 3:23 a.m., I woke up. I don't know why. I hadn't had any nightmares, nor had a noise interrupted my sleep. I simply opened my eyes, and there I was, awake, with my heart beating a bit faster than usual. It was then that I heard a soft sound, barely perceptible, like something metallic scraping the floor. I thought it might be my imagination, or perhaps a noise coming from a neighboring apartment. I tried to ignore it and turn towards the wall, but the sound continued. This time, closer. It was a slow, deliberate dragging, accompanied by a faint click, as if something was being pushed carefully. My body tensed. I decided to turn on my bedside lamp, but my hand was trembling so much that I nearly knocked it over. The light gave me immediate relief, though the sound stopped abruptly. I took a deep breath. Maybe it had been my imagination, but when I lay down again, I heard another noise, different this time. It was a whisper, barely a murmur, but it clearly came from my bedroom door. I'm awake, I told myself, trying to convince myself that it was all a misunderstanding. But the sound persisted, a low, raspy voice, whispering words I couldn't understand. I swallowed hard and got out of bed on shaky legs. I walked towards the door, trying not to make a sound, with my heart pounding in my ears. I pressed my eye to the peephole and looked out. Nothing. But something was wrong. I had left the door ajar before going to sleep. Now it was closed. I tried to turn the doorknob, but it was locked from the outside. My breathing quickened. I turned towards the window, thinking of calling for help. But as I took the first step, I saw it. Through the reflection in the hallway mirror, I could make out a shadow. It stood still, unmoving, behind me. I didn't want to turn around. I couldn't turn around. Panic completely paralyzed me. Then, the whisper turned into a low, guttural laugh that seemed to resonate in my head. No, I went out. I don't remember how I got to the floor or how long they... When I woke up, the sun had already risen, and my bedroom door was wide open. Nothing seemed out of place, but something was engraved on the wall next to my bed. A phrase written with what appeared to be my lipstick. "We will meet again." Since that night, I haven't slept with the lights off, and every time I hear a whisper or a click in the night, I feel that the man behind the door never left. He's just waiting. Whispers among the corn. The Hargrove family had lived on the outskirts of Crowsdale for generations. Their ancestral home, a crumbling edifice swallowed by the encroaching cornfields. The house had always whispered tales of sorrow and loss. But it wasn't until Amelia, their bright-eyed daughter, vanished one fateful autumn night that the true horror began to unfold. Amelia had always been drawn to the cornfields, entranced by the rustling leaves that seemed to whisper her name. One evening, she slipped away, confident she would return before dusk. But the sun surrendered to darkness, and the family's frantic search illuminated nothing but the oppressive blackness of the night. Days turned into weeks, and the search parties dwindled, leaving the Hargroves to grapple with the chilling void Amelia left behind. It wasn't just her absence that gnawed at them. It was the haunting presence that took root in the house. At first, it was just the creaks of an old structure settling, but soon the walls began to breathe with dread, and shadows flickered in the corners of their vision. Then came the apparitions. At midnight, a ghostly figure emerged from the depths of the cornfields, its form barely distinguishable from the stalks that surrounded it. Dressed in a tattered white dress, hair as wild as the wind, the figure glided through the fields, her face hidden in shadow. The family would hear her whispers echoing through the house, soft and melodic, yet laced with a sinister undercurrent that sent shivers down their spines. Each night, the apparition grew more tangible, her mournful wail seeping into the fabric of the Hargrove home, twisting their dreams into nightmares. They began to see glimpses of her in the mirrors, hear her laughter in the hallways, and feel her cold breath brushing against their necks as they tried to sleep. The walls of the house seemed to pulse with her restless energy, as if she were calling them to join her in the fields. One night, consumed by the torment of their daughter's absence, the family decided to venture into the cornfields at midnight to confront the spirit. Armed with only flashlights and sheer desperation, they stepped into the maze of crunching leaves, the air thick with tension. Suddenly, the ghostly figure appeared before them, ethereal and hauntingly beautiful. She beckoned them closer, her voice now clear, a melancholic echo that resonated in their bones. "Join me," she implored. "I've waited so long." In that moment, their hearts raced with fear and longing. As they reached for her, the ground trembled beneath them, the stalks twisting and writhing like snake-like arms, pulling them into a depths of darkness. In the chaos, a chilling realization struck. The ghost was not Amelia. It was a twisted reflection of who she had become. As darkness enveloped the family, the truth emerged. Amelia was lost, trapped forever in the cornfield's sinister embrace. And now they were to take her place, destined to haunt the very home they had known. As dawn broke, the house stood silent, the cornfields swaying in the gentle breeze, holding tight to their secrets. In Crowsdale, the Hargrove family had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers in the wind and the haunting echoes of a girl who had once wandered too far and never returned. Whispers in the walls. The old Whitmore estate stood at the edge of town, its once grand facade now consumed by creeping ivy and shadowy neglect. Locals whispered of strange occurrences, a light flickering in the attic when no one dared to live there, the sound of laughter echoing through the empty halls. But it was the disappearance of young Eliza Hawthorne that had set the town on edge. One fateful night, she had vanished without a trace, her last known location the very house that haunted the outskirts of their lives. As the midnight hour approached, a chill settled upon the air, thickening like fog. A curious thrill drove Mark and his friends, Clara and Ben, to the estate. They were fueled by youthful bravado, dismissing the warnings of the townspeople as mere tales. Armed with flashlights and an old camera, they ventured through the creaking gate, its rusty hinges protesting against their intrusion. Inside, the air was stale and heavy, laden with the scent of damp wood and mildew. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, and the house seemed to breathe, sighing with the weight of its history. The trio explored room after room, each draped in layers of dust and decay. Clara, ever the skeptic, laughed nervously, attempting to shake off the oppressive atmosphere that clung to them like a shroud. "Come on. It's just an old house," she said, forcing a smile. But the ghostly silence only deepened, swallowing her laughter whole. Mark's heart raced as they ascended the staircase, each step echoing through the hollow chambers. It was then that they heard it, a faint whispering, like a distant lullaby carried on the wind. "Did you hear that?" Ben's voice trembled, his bravado waning. The whispers beckoned them, a soft, inviting sound that seemed to pulse through the walls. They followed the eerie melody to a door at the end of the hall, its surface marred with deep scratches, as if something had desperately clawed its way out. As the clock struck midnight, the air crackled with energy. Mark reached for the doorknob, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He twisted it slowly. The door creaked open to reveal a darkened room, the moonlight spilling in from a broken window. Shadows flickered chaotically, and in the corner stood a figure, translucent and ethereal, its features obscured by the veil of darkness. "Help me," it whispered, voice like rustling leaves. It was the ghostly figure of a girl, her face reminiscent of Eliza, her eyes wide with desperation. Mark's breath hitched in his throat, and Clara gasped, stepping back instinctively. "Is that Eliza?" Ben asked, voice quaking. "Please," the spirit beckoned, tilting her head in a sorrowful plea. "I need to be free." The trio exchanged glances, the thrill of their adventure morphing into a paralyzing dread. Clara stepped forward, her curiosity overcoming her fear. "How can we help you?" The figure pointed towards a cracked floorboard. "Beneath." "My secret." The whisper trailed off, fading into an echo as the air grew colder. Mark knelt, prying up the floorboard to reveal a small, dust-coated box. Hands trembling, he lifted it, but as he opened it, a rush of wind erupted, extinguishing their flashlights. Darkness surrounded them, and the whispers turned frantic, swirling like a storm. "Leave. You must." The ghostly figure's voice morphed into a chilling scream that seemed to reverberate through their bones. In a panic, they stumbled back, but the door slammed shut, imprisoning them in the room. The air throbbed with a sinister energy, and the whispers transformed into guttural cries. Then, in an agonizing moment, the room faded away, and they found themselves standing outside the house, gasping for breath as the sun began to rise. Only then did they realize Eliza was gone, but so was Clara. Mark turned to Ben, panic rising in his throat. "Where is she?" The house loomed behind them, a silent witness as the sun's rays illuminated its malevolence. The whispers echoed in Mark's mind, a haunting reminder that some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. And deep within the walls of Whitmore Estate, Clara's laughter mingled with the whispers, forever lost to the midnight shadows. The dark mirror. I have always been a very observant person. I love losing myself in my thoughts in front of the mirror, analyzing every wrinkle, every spot, every change in my face. But one night, my reflection showed me more than just my own image. I lived alone in a small apartment. My room Besides being my refuge, was my workspace. I had a large antique mirror hanging over my desk. It was a mirror I had inherited from my grandmother, and I always liked its mysterious aura. One night, while working late, I looked up and froze. In the reflection, I saw a figure behind me. At first, I thought it was my own shadow, but the figure was too sharp, too defined. It had empty eyes and a smile that chilled my blood. Scared, I got up from my chair and approached the mirror. The figure moved with me, mimicking my every gesture. I tried to touch it, but my hand passed through the image as if it were a ghost. From that moment on, the appearances in the mirror became more frequent. Sometimes, I saw people I didn't know. Other times, deceased relatives. The most terrifying thing was that sometimes the figure in the mirror seemed to change, as if it were evolving, adapting to my deepest fears. I began to research mirrors and paranormal phenomena. I discovered that many ancient cults and religions believed mirrors were portals to other dimensions. Some even claimed that mirrors could capture souls. We tried everything to get rid of that mirror. We covered it, turned it around, even had it blessed. But nothing worked. The figure kept appearing, mocking me. Finally, I decided that I had to get rid of the mirror completely. I took it to a remote place and smashed it into 1,000 pieces. But even after doing so, I still had the feeling that something was watching me. Now, I live with the certainty that the mirror was not just an object. It was a window to another world, a dark world full of mysteries. And although I have destroyed it, the image of that figure still haunts me in my dreams. Do you think mirrors can be portals to other dimensions? Or maybe it was all the product of my sick imagination? Share your opinion in the comments, and tell me if you have ever had a similar experience. The sound of silence. I always believed that our deepest fears were the ones born in our own minds. Until that night, the silence proved me otherwise. I lived in a small apartment on the top floor of an old building. It was a quiet place, ideal for concentrating on my writing. Nights, however, were another story. The silence was so absolute that I could hear my own heartbeat. Sometimes I seemed to hear whispers, but I always attributed them to my imagination. One night, while working on my computer, I heard a strange noise. It was like a soft scratch, almost imperceptible, coming from the wall. At first, I didn't give it much importance, but the sound repeated, becoming more insistent each time. I got up from my chair and approached the wall, trying to identify the source of the noise. There was nothing. From that moment on, the noises became more frequent and varied. I heard light footsteps in the hallway, soft knocks on the door, and sometimes the sensation of being watched. At first, I tried to ignore it, but fear began to take hold of me. I decided to install security cameras throughout the apartment, but the images revealed nothing unusual. The technicians who reviewed the recordings assured me that everything was in order. However, I continued to feel that presence. One night while sleeping, I was awakened by a deafening noise. It was as if someone had hit the wall with all their strength. I jumped out of bed and turned on the light, but there was no one. The next day, I called an electrician to check the installation. While working, he confessed that he had felt a strange energy in the apartment. He told me he had heard of similar cases where people perceived invisible presences. From that moment, I decided to move out. Before leaving, I invited a priest to bless the apartment. While performing the ritual, The priest suddenly stopped and looked at me intently. He said he felt great sadness in that place, as if something bad had happened there. I never heard anything more about that apartment. But every time I close my eyes, I can still hear that noise, that soft scratch that chilled my blood. And I know I will never forget the feeling of being watched by something I couldn't see. Do you think it was just my imagination? Or is there something beyond what we can explain? Would you like to share your own paranormal experience? Leave your comment below. Don't forget to subscribe. Give us your valuable like and activate the campaign.